secretary gets back, we'll have the roll call.
Mark Acosta,
Here.
Nancy Burkhart,
Here.
Rick Ferris,
Here.
Scott Baldwin.
Here. Next item on the agenda is the minutes. Of course, Mrs. Burkhart, you weren't here last time, but three of us were, so have you, board members, had opportunity to review the minutes of the last month's meeting? Are there any additions or corrections?
No.
We'll take a motion to approve.
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. We move on to renewals. I will start with number 1, Catherine Ayers. Number 3, Anna Nguyen. Number 5, the Knights of Columbus. Number 6, Pence. Number 7, Darlissa Davis. Have all paid their fees, and therefore, and there are no complaints on any of them. So I move we approve the renewals of these conditional uses. All in favor, second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose no. They are approved. And on the agenda, number 2 and number 4. Number 2, James Girl, 82900 Wilson Avenue, conditional use permit for a tobacco packaging facility. And number 4, Laser Command LLC, that's an indoor family entertainment center, 3000 North Shun Pike. As of the meeting, they have not paid their renewal fees, but there are no complaints. Therefore, I move that we instruct our attorney to send them the usual letter that their conditional use permits have expired. However, if they wish to continue in business and they pay all their fees by our next regular meeting, their permits will be renewed. It's my motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion passes. First item on our agenda tonight is a tabled application from a couple of months ago. Sharon Dagger, 217 East 4th Street, requesting a conditional use permit for owner-occupied residence with short-term rentals for travel nurses. So it's someone, Ms. Dagger or someone, come up and explain what you've done and why you're ready to submit this now.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Dagger. I live at 217 East 4th Street and also own 215 East 4th Street.
And a couple of months ago, you indicated that you were planning to rent rooms to traveling nurses.
Yes, that is
And
correct.
then you requested tabling so that you could do some more research and whatnot. And you have submitted to the board a set of house rules, which was a concern, I know, of the board and of the neighbors. And frankly, I'm quite impressed with your rules. I wish they were all that clear. Drug usage will get you evicted. That's pretty clear. Subletting, not permitted. Guests, we need to be advised 1 or 2 days in advance, one person only. The backyard accessible, you may use the grill and eating area on the deck. Street parking only. So I personally think this is a pretty good set of rules, which, at least for me, was the big concern.
I would like to make a comment.
Yes.
I am not new to renting. We have done this for 35 years. I am adamantly opposed to leases. I far prefer to lease month to month.
it's very clear it'll be monthly rentals only. Would you, I'd like personally to see that in your statement of rules.
I'd be happy to add that. Oh, sorry.
Any other questions or comments, board members?
Yeah, remind me how many nurses you were gonna do, or how many places you had?
There would only be 2 available and 1 right now because the other is already leased. So the maximum would be 2 at all times in 2 different buildings. One in 217, one in 215.
Personally, I'm always concerned about noise bothering the neighbors.
We are too, all of us.
So you have a quiet time here, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Any other questions, comments, board members?
I'm not here.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak for or against this application? Yes, come on up to the front, ma'am, please, for the sake of our extensive recording facilities here.
Right.
If you could give your name and address for
Yes,
the
my
record.
name is Linda Knoble. I'm part owner of the 213 East 4th Street. Just a concern, at one other time, I think the last time we had this, we talked about a quiet time. There was mentioned like that you'd had in other rules that had been with the
Right, they
Airbnbs.
said here 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
I didn't hear that, so. Would we be able to have a copy of those rules, or is that?
Certainly,
Is that
just ask the staff.
okay.
This is all public record, everything here. You can have a copy of the application if you desire.
I think I've got a copy of that. I guess my next question would be, so if this is not upheld, what does anybody do about it? You know, what if something goes different than the rules?
Well, if there's some violation or something that you complain, you just go to the staff and they will direct your complaint to the appropriate person. Because there is an enforcement mechanism in Madison. Well, you could actually tell me right now, Joe, who would go out and deal with any complaint.
Substantial noise complaints would go directly to the police, and they would handle those citations. Then regarding the application, we get in touch with staff. And if there's a police report filed, that could be used as evidence as that. And typically, if it's serious enough, then it would be discussed at the next BZA meeting.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Would anyone else in the audience like to speak for or against? Board members, one last chance. Any questions, comments? All right, this is a conditional use permit. It is number 581 in our schedule of uses. So we will go through our findings of fact. I will just make a brief summary this time of what each one of these is for the sake of time. If any of you in the audience are interested, we have a criterion for conditional uses. There are 9 items that have to be answered affirmatively. And if you're interested, you can always go to staff and they'll be glad to print you out a copy. It's your government. Number 1, is this a conditional use? Mr. Acosta.
Yes, matches up with 581.
Mr. Ferris.
Yes, I believe it fits in 581.
Mrs. Burkhart.
Yes, I believe so.
And 581 is the appropriate one. Number 2, this is harmonious in accordance with general objectives of comprehensive plan. Mr. Acosta.
Yes, I see it fitting well with it.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, I see it fitting well as well. I think it's meeting a need of our community.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree with those comments.
I see no, since it's number 581, It's in the, schedule of uses, that is part of the comprehensive plan, so I think that one's met. This one is design, maintain harmonious, appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general area. Mr. Acosta.
Yeah, the property I assume will stay as is from, and which is already fitting to the area.
Mr. Ferris.
I agree with Mr. Acosta's comment.
Mrs. Burkhart.
Yes, I don't think there'll be any changes.
The general vicinity are very large houses and so forth. I think that one's met. Number 4, hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring uses. Mr. Acosta.
Do not think it will be, long as the, owners do, monitor the rules, dealing with noise and disturbance and all that.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, I think now that we have a set of house rules, there shouldn't be any major issues.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree, as long as house rules are enforced.
And I agree, enforcement of house rules should take care of disturbance. Number 5, this is about essential utilities, sewer, water, and all that. Mr. Acosta.
No issue, obviously already existing, structure.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, all of those services are currently being provided.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree with that comment.
And it's downtown, all the utilities and so forth are there in abundance. That one's met. 6, this is requirements of public expense, not detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. Mr. Acosta.
See no issue with that whatsoever.
Mr. Ferris.
I see no reason to believe it'll be detrimental to the community.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree, I see no detriment.
And I do not think renting 2 apartments is gonna harm the community at all. Number 7, this is excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, fumes, glare. Mr. Acosta.
No, I see no issue with that.
Mr. Ferris.
I see no reason to believe there'll be issues with that either.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I see no reason for excess production.
I don't think 2 units of an apartment are gonna overdo traffic. I think that one's met. Number 8, this is interference with traffic and so forth. Mr. Acosta.
No issues.
Mr. Ferris.
No, a couple of additional vehicles is not gonna cause, traffic jams.
Mrs.
I
Burkhart.
agree with that comment.
And it's on major thoroughfares. That one is almost not even relevant. This one, number 9, is destruction of natural scenic historic features. Mr. Acosta.
No, I have nothing detrimental at all.
Mr. Ferris.
No, nothing about the facilities are gonna change, so they're not a detriment now, so I don't think they will be going forward either.
Mrs.
And I
Burkhart.
agree with those previous comments.
And utilizing these buildings helps to preserve them, so I think that one's met. So I move we approve this conditional use permit for the period of 1 year with the condition that the house rules be followed, and with the second condition that the house rules be amended first to say no leases, monthly rental only. That's my motion.
I second that.
And can we have a roll call vote?
Mark Acosta,
Yes.
Nancy Burkhart,
Yes.
Rick Ferris,
Yes.
Scott Baldwin.
Yes. Well, you have your permit, ma'am.
Thank you, Board.
You're welcome. Second item on our agenda. JKAK Investments LLC, conditional use permit for mechanic shop and body shop, 2575 Wilson Avenue. That's in M1. Yes, sir. If you could give your name and address for the record and tell the board what you're doing and so forth.
Okay, my name's Scott Lynch, and my address is 1800 Valley Vista Court here in Madison. And I represented Mr. Kaler in the purchase of the property, and found out that it was zoned industrial, and his use is going to be a continuation of basically what it was since it was built originally, which was to work on the Miss Madison, and, so he has the body shop, and that's the reason we're here.
And this is basically Fat Boys is moving to a
And Mr.
new
Kaler's
location.
here if we have any questions.
Okay. After the unfortunate fire. And I do note that it is, the building is right across from the high school's football field, and it's right next door to what appears to be the, Madison High School's bus barn for their school buses.
Where they work on the buses, yeah.
And driving by, I noticed that in the back part of their lot, there are a couple of, look like 400 gallon tanks for diesel fuel, so. So this here will basically then be just the same thing they were doing in the old location, body shop work and
Yeah.
some repair of chassis and whatnot.
Correct.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
Staff, do you have any idea how long that previous mechanic shop was there? Was that like 10, 15 years?
Oh, was that the Willis? About 7 years, Jay thinks.
It's been a lot of different things, hasn't it?
I think it's always been related to. Yeah, that's what it was built for originally, yeah.
It's always looked like an auto mechanic shop to me, yeah.
It works out perfect for him,
Yeah.
and with the fire and everything, it's been a, yeah, and there's,
Any other questions or comments, board members? Would anybody in the audience like to speak for or against this application? Well, if there are none, one last time, board members. Okay, this is a conditional use permit. It's use number 641 in our schedule of uses, section 7. And once again, we will go through the findings of fact. I won't read them out this time since I did before. The first one, is this a schedule approved, Mr. Acosta?
Yes, meet 641.
Mr. Ferris?
Yes, I think it, fits into 641.
Mrs. Burkhart?
I agree with those two.
And 641 is the appropriate one. Number 2, general objectives, et cetera, Mr. Acosta?
Yes, I mean, it's gonna make use of an area, similar use as what it's had in the past, and, having the occupant there, will be a good thing.
Mr. Ferris?
Yeah, I agree as well. I think it fits in with the overall, comprehensive plan.
Mrs. Burkhart?
I agree with that.
And yes, using buildings that were designed to be used, that is the general idea. Number 3, it fits in with the existing or intended character of the area, Mr. Acosta.
Yes, I think, applicant has always kept his places looking nice and, maybe actually be an improvement to this location.
Mr. Ferris?
Yeah, I mean, the structure was used for similar, type business activity prior to this. I think it fits right in.
Mrs. Burkhart?
I agree, it's just a continuation of same service.
And I agree, the general vicinity is yet another bus garage, work on the school buses, fits right in. Number 4, hazardous or disturbing, Mr. Acosta.
No more than it has ever been.
Mr. Ferris.
No, I don't see any reason to believe that it will be.
Mrs. Burkhart.
No, I don't see a problem with that one.
And I really don't see any hazardous problems there. I think that one's met. Number 5 is utilities and so forth, Mr. Acosta.
No issues, certainly already served.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, those services are already in existence and being provided.
Mrs.
I
Burkhart.
agree with those comments.
And that's adequately provided with all necessary utilities. Number 6, detrimental economic welfare of the community, Mr. Acosta.
No, it'll be, an addition, actually.
Mr. Ferris?
Yeah, I think it'll be, a positive move for the business owner and good for, our community.
Mrs.
I
Burkhart?
agree with Mr. Ferris's comment.
And keeping a business going is not detrimental to anything. Number 7, is there any excess production, traffic noise, smoke, fumes, glare, odors, so forth? Mr. Acosta?
Don't envision that any more than what has been before.
Mr. Ferris?
Yeah, I don't think anything excessive. I think it's, it'll just blend right in, and a lot of people may not even know that, there's a change in occupants.
Mrs. Burkhart?
I agree with Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Ferris put it very well, nobody will even know you're there. And you're farther away from any residences than you were in the old location, cause you had houses right across the street in the old one, and here you're back off the road. I think this is actually an improvement. Number 8, interference with traffic, Mr. Acosta.
That already has existing, vehicular approaches.
Mr. Ferris?
Yeah, I don't see any reason to believe it's gonna cause problems with traffic.
Mrs. Burkhart?
I see no problems with that.
And I don't either. There'll be tow trucks going in and cars driving out, not in any great numbers. Number 9, loss or damage of historic scenic stuff, Mr. Acosta.
No impact like in that nature.
Mr. Ferris,
Yeah, there will be no changes in that regard.
Mrs. Burkhart,
I see no impact either.
and neither do I. I don't think there's any historic features there. Well, we have gone through our findings of fact. And given the fact that there has been a mechanic shop there for a number of years, given the fact that next door is another mechanic shop maintaining school buses, given the fact of the zoning, I move that we approve this conditional use permit for a period of 10 years. Do we have a second?
I second that.
And could we have a roll call?
Mark Acosta,
Yes.
Nancy Burkhart,
Yes.
Rick Ferris,
Yes.
Scott Baldwin.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next on the agenda, Regina Erlewine, 929 West Second. This is a variance from developmental standards to build a 2-story deck in the place of an existing single-story deck. This is requesting a 0 lot line. This variance is for a 0 lot line on the north property line that abuts the south side of 929 West Second. So our variance concerns simply 1 0 lot line of downtown property. And I hope I got your name right.
You
Mrs.
did.
Erlewine.
Yes, early wine.
So if you could explain to the board what a variance requires some peculiarity to the property.
Okay, when we
Explain.
bought the property, I'm Regina Earlywine, 929 West Second Street. There were 2 different decks that abutted right up, the second one was right up against the back of my neighbor's house. And we tore that deck off and we're just replacing it with a stone patio. And I guess the rules have changed and they now have a 3-foot inset or setback. And so we were just wanting to put it back where it was, and I also have a letter from the neighbor who has the adjoining house saying she has no issue with me putting the deck, or the patio back in the same place the deck was.
Yeah, you have an L-shaped property.
Right, my yard's the back and her yard's the side. So the back of my property goes, it's 2 houses that are all one building, pretty much.
And you've torn down an old rotted deck and you're just essentially putting something right back where the old
Right.
one was, but
Exactly.
the 3-foot yards are a function of the zoning ordinance. And we run up against that an awful lot downtown,
Yeah,
because this is a 19th century town. So you're building your deck and your patio right up to the back of your
right.
house
The
property.
stone patio will go right up against hers, and then the deck, or the concrete patio goes up against the back of my house, and then there's a little bit of grass that,
So the two-story unit is only over the concrete patio?
right,
Okay.
right.
I went by your place and actually you can hardly see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anything there?
inside the fence.
Board members, any other questions, comments?
So are you allowing her to use that part behind her house? I know you own it, but
Yes, she's
Yeah.
a wonderful neighbor. She mows
Right.
my yard, and I told her she can use my patio anytime she would like to use
right,
my
cause
patio.
just looking at, that's what was so peculiar, because you own like right up to her
Right,
back
her,
then.
her back windows looked out on this,
So really, you're improving hers, like you said,
yeah.
for her.
There was a
benefit, too.
groundhog that lived under that rotten deck, and so I'm hoping it's gone, and
Right.
the wasps
It'll
and
just move to
hornets.
next door,
Got a
probably
good
yours.
situation all the way around.
Varmint extermination.
Really, it's a win-win for both of you, it seems like.
I think so, yes.
Any other questions or comments, board members? Would anyone in the audience like to speak for or against this variance request? Well, then we will move on to our findings of fact. Variance from developmental standards. Being it's a variance, need you to, board members, to give your reasoning, please. Number one, is this injurious to public health, safety, morals, general welfare? Mr. Acosta.
I don't see that in any way. It's, mainly using the same space for the same thing.
Mr. Ferris.
I don't see any reason to believe, it will be either. I think, the applicant has already, sought the approval of, adjoining landowners, and sounds like they've, worked it out amongst themselves, so.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree, if anything, she's making it safer for both of them and improving the properties, essentially of both properties.
And since this is a request for a zero lot line, which frankly you can't even see, it's replacing something that was there. I see no damage at all in this regard of number one. Number two, this is use and value be affected in an adverse manner of adjacent property. Mr. Acosta.
No, I think, contrary would, be an improvement as you're replacing some old structures and improving the general area as well.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, I think it's an improvement. I think it's a win-win for, both the applicant and the, neighbor.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree, she's improving both sides of the property.
And we have heard certainly no testimony from a realtor or anybody that says property values are going to be hurt, so I think that one's met. Number three, this is practical difficulties. Mr. Acosta.
Strict application, would not allow her to utilize that 3-foot space, of her own yard, and put in place what she wants to put in place.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, strict application would not allow the, project to move forward. It's just another example of the, situations that we run into with these downtown properties.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree, she wouldn't be able to move forward improving the properties.
And I think those are well put. It's the same thing we run into in these tiny properties down here that were built long ago. So I think that that is a sufficient practical difficulty. Well, we've gone through our findings of fact. We'll take a motion to approve.
I make a motion, we approve this variance.
Second.
And can we have a roll call?
Mark Acosta,
Yes.
Nancy Burkhart,
Yes.
Rick Ferris,
Yes.
Scott Baldwin.
Yes. Your variance is approved, ma'am.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Next on the agenda. Oops, did I miss number one?
Yes,
My apologies, I missed number one. First on the agenda last. Oh. Well,
Happened for a reason. Happened for a reason.
if I'd only kept my mouth shut. Oh, well. Mr. Viterna, Mark Viterna, 524 Walnut Street, variance from developmental standards to allow for construction of single-family residence, 0 lot lines. This says north, south, and west lot lines, but the application seems to be, we'll go with that. At any rate, you're asking for 0 lot lines to rebuild a new home on the lot. So if you could state your name and address and explain what you're doing, why you need this variance, what's peculiar about the property. That's always the reason for a variance. There's some peculiarity about this property that can't really follow the zoning ordinance. So if you could address these.
Yes, Mark Viterna. It's under my company name, Madison Unlimited LLC, but I'm representing 524 Walnut Street. And yes, Mr. Baldwin, it is quite peculiar. Yes, most of these these meetings revolve around downtown. So, yes, and for those that aren't familiar with this property, it was actually demolished, I want to say 3 or 4 months ago. Just a complete lost, dilapidated structure, and the previous owners had it taken down. It's been wonderful that they took the initiative to do so. There's been a lot of blight elimination on Walnut Street, and it's really come along. Turns out that property owner at 522 is going to be leaving Madison, so he asked me if I wanted to purchase the property, and I actually own 524, which is on the north side, so I purchased the property about a month and a half ago. And to clarify on the application, originally I had requested an east setback variance, but as I was working with Joe Patterson, I don't think that'll be necessary, so we actually made an amendment to the application online, and maybe it did not propagate through to the system or wherever we got that. So we're not going to be needing anything on the east side, which is, the east side, which is the rear of the property. So if you were on Walnut Street and facing towards Saddle Tree Lane, the front is on Walnut, and then Saddle Tree Lane is where the backyard is. No setback variances are required. However, on the left and right, which is the north and south side, we would like to request one, and I'm not sure if we needed one for the west side because that's right up to the sidewalk. I think in the current zoning ordinance we may not need that downtown, but we asked for it just to be on the safe side because that's what all those row houses there come right up to the sidewalk. And the reason we're asking for a 0-foot setback is because the existing structure that was on there was quite small. I think the entire lot size is 22 feet. And the older structure was right at like 16 feet or 17 feet. It was very narrow for a 2-story. So I think just for nothing else to capitalize on the space and probably for a little bit of stability, add those extra couple of feet. And I think there were a few questions regarding the height I had as well. Now we haven't drawn out any plans or anything yet, but is my understanding with the current zoning ordinance that is 45 feet high?
I believe that's correct. Yes,
maximum
sir.
for HDR, okay. In our site plan, we specified 22 feet. Again, if we don't get the variance, we probably won't build, so it won't matter. So we kind of ballparked it. Most 2-stories are between 20 and 30 feet. I think we're well below that 45, but I just wanted to point that out in case that was something that we needed to reapply for.
Well, if you wanted to build a 45-foot, that would be pretty big.
I think
You
so.
would
Might look odd on that narrow lot.
Yeah, it might be a little
be
tippy.
like a water tower. You'd have to apply for a variance about that too, but I don't think that would. But this one is about lot lines.
Correct, and
moment.
that's kind of where we're at. We're gonna be a ways from construction, because, like I said, I own 526 on the other side. We're gonna try to finish that one up first. That's a PACE grant property, and we have a little bit of a tight timeline on that
You
one.
own 526 also?
Yes, and 524, yes, sir.
That's the house immediately to the north.
Yes,
On the
correct.
north side.
Question I have you done a survey of that lot?
I have not. What I have done, and with your permission, Mr. Baldwin, I have a handout with some rough photographs that might kind of help illustrate some of those lines a little better, more recent.
We better not have any controversy. Our legal department is departing.
We don't pay overtime.
And no, that kind of goes
That usually
part of it,
speaks to
so,
full.
you know, the surveys these days are costing about $2,000 a pop when I did them. And, you know, if we have any questions, I wanted to kind of get the feedback from the board, and if it's something we need to table pending the survey, we can certainly do that. But on the second page, there's actually some, outlines that kind of show, based on, Google Street imagery as well as what I've actually taped it off today, because according to the recorder's office, it is 22 feet across, and giving the historical evidence and where the fasteners were for the fence, I can kind of give you a rough outline of what it would be, but of course, no one will know till you actually purchase that survey. But I know that that tree, you'll notice there on the second page in that picture there, we got a big giant tree that's kind of a
Right, it's on
problem, and I spoke with the owner of 522, which is that one on the right there, and I think we would like to abate that tree, i.e. cut it down, because on the third page, you can see where that tree is actually sitting on top of my property there on 526. It's kind of a
moving all the way
problem.
across.
It's also leaning quite substantially to the north, you can see, so it's about one good thunderstorm away from taking that house down. And also, it's probably gonna be pretty detrimental to that portion of the sidewalk. But of course, I've not talked to the,
You're talking about this tree here?
yes, and on the bottom right, that tree was, that photo was taken from Google Street View about 2013. So you can see it's actually grown quite a bit. The
Quite a
top
bit.
left is a more accurate, depiction of it. So the property line kind of goes through the middle of that tree, and you can see on the second photo in the top right, that perspective gives you a little bit better understanding of how the property line goes down. So it's a good 6 or 7 feet from that property on the south side. It's a bit closer on the north side where I own the property at 526. It's about 4 feet from that building, give or take, I think.
My concern was, if we give you a variance for 0 lot lines, where are the lot lines? If you don't know where they are, how do we know you're gonna go right up to them?
Well, and-
Usually people come here and they wanna frequently anyway, they wanna rebuild on an old foundation.
Mhm.
No problem. But that foundation in that lot's gone, at least I can't see it. I drove by there and looked at it, or walked by. So that's my only concern. I really don't have concerns about going to 0 lot line in downtown, cause so many buildings here were built that way.
Sure, and the only reason I feel somewhat confident in my approximation is just because of how the recorder puts down those plats. So we have established lot lines for 526, and then we're on the old-fashioned meets and bounds system. So you take 22 paces down south, and that's your lot line according to the recorder's office. So I imagine that that's partly what the surveyors go off of as well. I think it'd be
Well, the surveyors go off of definite marks, cause this was all laid out by the Congressional Township System of 1795. So they start with, frequently they start with pins or railroad spikes or something that's somewhere, and they measure off of that from a detailed description, which I've read some of them.
And again, I mean, if it's something we can certainly table and have that purchased.
So about how close would you be to your house just north? Like about 3 feet from that or so? Cause I noticed there's a little bit of a concrete scooped out drain looking thing there on the sidewalk, and there's of course, on the house to the north, there's the gas meter, and in the back, there's a unit for an air conditioner, which you might be tearing out, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably about 4 feet, and again, I was less concerned on that side because I own the property. They're long-term rentals, they're not gonna be sold in my lifetime, so it's gonna be one of those things where I kinda drive some of those decisions, and yeah, we may not end up at 22 feet, because once we actually do the location of the, utilities. If for whatever reason we have to work within that tree, I don't know if we can even build if that tree's there. I mean, we could maybe make a smaller structure, but I find I have to be pretty agile with downtown stuff. You know, I may have to, once we kind of do some location and surveys, we may have to actually adjust some of those. So it's kind of a safety margin, if you
Then
will.
your neighbor to the south, well, he would have a big interest in where that lot line is, cause he doesn't wanna go and sell the house and find out someday that you've encroached a foot and a half on his property, and now we've got a big legal war.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and again, he's,
So we had a situation about 3 or 4 years ago where somebody actually did encroach on a neighbor's property.
oh, we would never build without the survey, but no, I was just, if it's something that,
Well, that's
Yeah.
my only concern really is where are the lot lines we're approving?
yeah, no, we can certainly purchase that and have that at the next meeting. Well, it may not be the next meeting, I think they're about three months behind, but, we can certainly reapply and, have that available.
Well, I've spoke my piece, board members. Do any of you have any questions, comments? Questions about what I've said?
I think it's
Anything?
valid.
Well, could that be a condition of the approval as well, if we got to that point?
Yes, we can make that a condition that we approve the variance with the condition that he do a survey and adhere to the survey results.
I think you were saying you would probably do anyway before you build.
Actually, I mean, if it would be something where we think it would be conditionally approved, I could probably have it ordered immediately. I guess the only thing I would ask is if, we set some sort of timeline, like, I don't know, what would be, people are pretty busy these days, like if it was 6 months or less, that should be plenty of time. I think most of them are about 3 months ahead, at least that was, Rezo and, Pettit's folks were about 3 months
Well,
out.
the reason
so-
I'm dwelling on this is because one of the criteria is, will this affect substantially adversely adjacent properties? And this is at least from my thinking, this is having a survey to know exactly where the lot line is protects the adjacent properties in cases of future sales and whatever. That's
Sure,
my
would it be,
thinking,
would it
board
be,
members.
something to give the board a little bit more comfort if we changed it to, say, 1.5 feet or something?
Well, you don't even have to do that. I just wanna be sure that you know where the lot line is. That's the only my concern. As we had a case where a guy wanted to build a fence. He had a very large front yard and he wanted to build a fence right up near the road, which was his front yard. Well, he didn't necessarily own that, and you can't go building fences and stuff in public right of way of roads and so forth, as you well know. So that one ended up, the gentleman, actually, I think he just withdrew the application.
Yeah, and the only thing that makes this one a little bit unique or interesting is, because I own 526, I guess my thought process was, the lot I purchased about for 15,000 or so, and it surveys 10% of the cost of the lot. I wanted to see if it's even something feasible to get that beforehand, because if there were any other issues, I could just say, now it's a yard with the rental. It was a pretty easy fix. I didn't necessarily buy this, it wouldn't have been a big deal if I couldn't build on it, right? Because I do own the adjacent lot, I could have just then said, okay, now whoever rents it now has a nice big lot. But yeah, it's a valid point, absolutely. And it's something that, when I'm investing that kind of money, the $2,000 is not really a big deal anymore when you're actually building a structure. But it's hard to recoup that on just a vacant yard. So, I mean, I would be more than happy to have a condition on that, because that's something we would do anyway before we broke ground.
I've got a question. On 526, when you look at, there's obviously a door in the back there.
Mhm.
So are they able to access that, and that's still on 526's property, or? do you
Oh,
know
yes,
if
yes,
that's,
that's,
okay.
again, the distance between the buildings, between my building and the lot line is about 4 feet, give or take, and again, that would be something where, as we draw plans up, we may decrease the footprint of the building, because I've not really had, much talk with any architects, and, I'm not even sure if, cause a lot of it also depends on what we were planning on, is maybe putting some off-street parking by a garage on the first floor, because parking's really bad on that part of Walnut. Actually, they've yelled at me a lot, the residents there, for just parking not near my house, so, but that would involve the street department and see if there's a way that we could accommodate that, so. This is the first step I've taken, actually, so there's quite a bit of variables, so, I mean, if it's not the right timing, to request it now, we can do it later on too. That's also an option.
Well, I don't see any issue with the timing. Mr. Acosta suggested a contingent approving a zero lot lines on, well, it would be north, south, and east, contingent upon a survey establishing the lot lines. Sounds to me reasonable. Any comment from staff?
I didn't think you needed a lot line east, you didn't need a zero lot line east, right?
Not east, correct. In west, we may not need one. I don't know. I don't have the zoning
This,
ordinance in front of me.
Just showing the current west lot line at 0, correct?
So one of those is the actual measurement from the center of Walnut Street. I know that there's also generally a setback between the center of the street, but it may not matter in this case. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It makes sense because every house along there is right
right,
adjacent to the
Right,
sidewalk,
yeah,
so
but,
they were all built.
If we need it, we would apply for it. The one that I think we can throw out, that there would be any discussion, is the east portion, which is the space
The
between
backyard.
backyard, closer to Saddle Tree Lane, correct, sir?
Any other questions, comments, board members? Would anybody in the audience like to speak for or against this variance application? One last chance, board members, any questions? Okay, well, then we will move on to our findings of fact. Variance from development standards, and we will just say that this is for zero lot line on the north side, zero lot line on the south side, and zero lot line on the west. We'll just include that. But nothing about the east, which in his case is his backyard. Number one, will approval of this be injurious public health, safety, morals, general welfare? Mr. Acosta.
No, it'll have a positive impact on the community.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, I think it'll have a positive effect as well.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I think it's improving the welfare of the community.
I see no harm to the general welfare because that particular neighborhood is pretty well built with the houses right next to each other, narrow, right up to the sidewalk. It's very similar. Number two, adjacent property values be affected substantially adversely. Mr. Acosta.
No, they'll be improved, and, to your point, what you're requesting fits with so many other houses and lots in that same neighborhood, so.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, I think, worst case scenario, he buys the lot, doesn't build, and just adds green space. So it's an improvement to the neighborhood either way.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree, it's an improvement of already what was there.
Yeah.
There was a house there for years and years and years. Another house is just going back to what it was, only a better house. Practical difficulties in the use of the property. That's the big one, of course, always for variance. Mr. Acosta.
Yeah, it makes it virtually impossible to build a functional house, end up with a 15-foot width type thing.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, I mean, it kills the project.
Mrs. Burkhart.
I agree with the size of the lot that you've been given.
And I agree, a narrow lot, 22-foot lot, 6 feet, total setbacks, north and south leaves a 15-foot wide house. Mobile homes are bigger. So we've gone through our findings of fact. I move we approve this variance contingent upon the applicant obtaining a survey of the lot and adhering to the lot lines established by the survey.
I second that.
Can we have a roll call?
Mark Acosta,
Yes.
Nancy Burkhart,
Yes.
Rick Ferris,
Yes.
Scott Baldwin.
Yes. You have your variance, sir.
Is there, is it just before we break ground, or is there specific, within like a couple of months contingency?
I specified no time limit in the, motion, so obviously you can't, I don't see how you could break ground until you know what you're building to.
Oh, right, yeah, we'll probably put the order in right away, but I don't, have no idea how far back they are, so didn't know.
Well,
Okay.
I hope it doesn't take long. Get your
Yeah, I think
survey.
the last one did take 3 months, believe it or not, there, but that was a while back, so maybe not so good.
All right. The only concern, where's the lot line at? Protects everybody.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, investing that kind of money in a building, we're definitely
Sure.
not gonna do it, but for a $15,000 empty lot, it was still kind of, we were debating whether or not we were gonna purchase it first, we wanted to kind of see. But I think it's a perfect solution, you know, contingency that we won't move forward without it, and if we can move forward with it, then we're definitely gonna buy it.
Okay. Thank Mr. Acosta. Good idea. That finishes our new applications, old business. Just for the record, One Scientific. That business is no longer in operation, so it's a moot question. We had a few others, 3 others that were late paying. They paid, and hence per previous motion, their conditional uses are renewed. Is there anything else, staff, that I have forgotten? And we take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. We are adjourned.
I thought I was here last month, wasn't I?
You were out one.
Oh, yeah. I was here last month, wasn't I?
It was Rick that was gone.
I thought I was here, I thought.
Yeah, well,
I remember.
you don't pay me much.
What's troubling, Nancy, is you weren't sure if you were.
I
doing
know,
it.
I was like, where was I?
You were too quiet.